What I'm about to show you are 5 shocking legal loopholes buried deep inside HOA rules. Loopholes that can erase fines, expose their mistakes, and make them back off fast. Stay tuned, because once you know these, your HOA will never look at you the same way again. Ever felt like your HOA is just waiting to slap you with another ridiculous fine? Wrong shade of beige on your fence? A flower pot 2 inches too tall? Yeah, that's how they get you. But here's what they don't want you to know. Those rules they hide behind? Full of loopholes. Legal ones. And if you know how to use them, you can turn their own system against them. Today, I'm exposing 5 shocking HOA loopholes that real homeowners have used to erase fines, stop harassment, and even make the HOA back off completely. Stick around, because number 5, that one's the nuclear option. HOAs were created to protect property values, but too often they act like mini dictatorships, handing out tickets for brass height and threatening liens over a rusty mailbox. Most homeowners don't realize that HOAs are corporations, not governments. And that means they're legally bound by specific rules, corporate bylaws, fair housing laws, and state regulations. If you read the fine print and know your rights, you can actually outsmart them legally. No screaming matches, no lawsuits, just smart strategy. All right, now that you're ready to fight back the smart way, let's jump into loophole number 1, where you use their own bylaws to stop fines before they even start. Loophole number 1, the proof or it didn't happen rule. Here's the first shocking truth your HOA hopes you never find out. They can't legally fine you without evidence. Sounds obvious, right? But you'd be shocked how many HOAs send out automatic fines based on a random complaint, a blurry photo, or sometimes nothing at all. Let's say you get that dreaded envelope, violation notice. You open it and see unapproved paint color on garage door, $150 fine. Most homeowners panic. They either rush to repaint or worse, pay the fine just to avoid trouble. That's exactly what your HOA counts on, intimidation and silence. But here's what they don't expect. You standing your ground legally. The moment you receive that letter, don't argue and don't apologize. Instead, calmly send this response, and yes, do it in writing. Please provide dated photographic evidence of the alleged violation, the name of the board member or inspector who confirmed it, and a citation of the exact HOA bylaw that was violated. That one paragraph changes everything. Because by law, and according to most HOA governing documents, they can't enforce a fine unless they have 1. Verifiable proof of the violation, 2. Gave proper written notice according to procedure, 3. Allowed you a chance to appeal before the fine was finalized. Miss any of those steps? Boom! Their entire case collapses. Here's the real kicker. In actual cases from states like Florida and Texas, homeowners have had hundreds or even thousands of dollars in fines completely erased, not because they hired fancy lawyers, but because the HOA couldn't back up its claims with valid proof. Remember, HOAs act tough because they expect you not to question them. But when you calmly demand evidence in writing, you expose the weak link in their system. So next time a fine letter hits your mailbox, don't panic, don't argue. Just say, show me the proof. That's loophole number 1, and it's the first step to turning their own rulebook into your greatest weapon. Loophole number 2, the bylaw trap they don't want you to read. All right, now that you've demanded proof and thrown them off balance, let's talk about their biggest weakness, their own rulebook. Every HOA operates under a set of documents called Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, the CCRARs. Sounds boring, right? That's what they want you to think. Because buried inside those pages are loopholes that can completely kill a fine before it ever sticks. See, most HOAs assume homeowners never actually read these rules, so they'll fine you for things they think are against policy even when the CCRARs don't clearly support it. For example, they might claim your pickup truck violates the No Commercial Vehicles rule, but if that rule doesn't define what a commercial vehicle actually is, it's vague and legally unenforceable. Or maybe they fine you for installing a new mailbox without approval. But if the rulebook doesn't specify the approval timeline, they're required to respond within a reasonable period. If they don't, you win by default. Here's how you use this loophole. Go through the exact section of the bylaw they quote in your violation notice. Read it carefully, word for word. If it's vague, outdated, or doesn't clearly apply to your situation, you can write back, "According to section, insert number, of the HOA CCARARs, this rule does not specifically prohibit my action. Please cite the exact clause supporting your claim." That one line sends chills through every board member's inbox because it proves you've done your homework. Most HOA board members aren't lawyers. They rely on intimidation, not precision. When you hit them with their own language, you instantly flip the power dynamic. And just like that, loophole number 2 lets you turn their bylaws into your legal armor. Loophole number 3, the meeting minute miracle. If you've ever wondered how HOAs get away with sudden rule changes or mystery fines, this one's for you. Most homeowners don't realize this. HOAs are legally required to keep public records of all meetings, votes, and rule changes. They're called meeting minutes. And here's the loophole. If the rule they fined you for wasn't officially voted on or recorded in those minutes, that fine isn't valid. It's just paper intimidation. Let's say they fine you for leaving your trash cans out for too long. You check the rulebook. Nothing specific. So you politely email the HOA and request the meeting minutes from the date that policy was approved. If they can't produce it, boom, you've just exposed a procedural violation. That fine can be voided because the HOA didn't properly document the rule's adoption. And here's where it gets even juicier. If they refuse to give you the minutes, that's a violation too. Under most state HOA acts, yes, even in strict states like Florida, California, and Texas, homeowners have the right to access association records within a reasonable time frame. So if they stall or can't find them, your next move is simple. Please provide the official meeting minutes approving this rule, as required by state statute and HOA governance policy. Once that's in writing, you've cornered them, because HOAs love to bluff, but documentation doesn't lie. This loophole has helped countless homeowners overturn fines and even force rule reversals, all because the HOA skipped one simple administrative step. So before you ever pay a dime, remember, no proof in the minutes means no power in the fine. That's loophole number 3, the one that turns HOA red tape into your get-out-of-fine-free card. Loophole number 4, the selective enforcement trap. This one is a game changer, and most HOAs pray you never find out about it. It's called selective enforcement, and it's one of the strongest legal arguments homeowners can use to crush unfair fines. Here's how it works. Your HOA is legally required to enforce its rules consistently across the entire community. That means if they fine you for, say, having your car parked on the street overnight, they must also fine everyone else who breaks that same rule. But here's the twist. They almost never do. Let's say your neighbor has 2 cars parked on the street every night, but only you got the violation notice. That's selective enforcement. And in court, it's a serious due process problem. In fact, judges have thrown out HOA fines and even attorney fees just because the board couldn't prove they enforced rules equally. So, how do you use this loophole? Simple. Gather proof of inconsistency. Take photos, note dates, and document other violations of the same rule by other residents. Then send the HOA a written letter. I believe this fine constitutes selective enforcement, as other residents have not been fined for the same condition. Please review and rescind this penalty. That one line can stop them cold, because selective enforcement isn't just unfair, it's illegal. And if they ignore your letter and keep pushing the fine, you can escalate it legally knowing the law is squarely on your side. Remember, HOAs survive on intimidation, but the law demands fairness. So if they're enforcing rules selectively, they've already lost. That's loophole number 4, the rule that turns their double standards into your strongest defense. Loophole number 5, the procedural timing loophole. This one catches even veteran HOA boards off guard because it's not about the rule itself, it's about when and how they enforce it. It's called the procedural timing loophole, and it's one of the cleanest ways to wipe out a fine without even arguing the violation. Every HOA is bound by its own timeline for enforcement, specific deadlines for sending notices, scheduling hearings, and giving you time to respond. These steps aren't optional. They're required by law and by the HOA's own governing documents. But here's the kicker. HOAs constantly mess this up. They'll send a violation letter months after the incident, or they'll skip the warning notice step completely. Sometimes they even fine you before the appeal period has expired, a massive legal mistake. Courts view this as a due process violation, meaning the HOA acted outside its authority. If they miss a deadline or skip a procedure, the fine becomes void on technical grounds, no matter what you supposedly did wrong. Here's how you use it. Go through your HOA's CCRAR and fine policy. Highlight every section mentioning timelines, things like a written notice must be provided within 15 days of discovery. Homeowners must be granted at least 10 days to respond before penalties are imposed. Then, compare those to the actual dates on your notices. If the HOA violated its own timing rules even once, congratulations, you've got leverage to demand dismissal.
The HOA might act like they hold the power, but procedures are their Achilles heel. One missed deadline, one skipped notice, and their entire case collapses. That's loophole number 5, the quiet time bomb that can make even the toughest HOA fold instantly. Outro. Take back your power. So there you have it. 5 shocking loopholes your HOA never wanted you to find out about. From knowing their rules better than they do to catching their timing mistakes, you now hold the playbook that flips the power dynamic completely. Remember, the HOA only wins when you stay silent. But you're no longer silent. You're informed, strategic, and ready to fight smart. So next time they send that notice of violation, don't panic. Pause, pull out what you learned today, and make them play by their own rules for once. If this helped you, hit that like button so more homeowners can fight back too, and subscribe for more real HOA battles and legal hacks. Because knowledge isn't just power, it's protection.
What if I told you my neighbor had a secret room hidden inside their house? A room the HOA swore didn't exist. At first, it sounded like one of those neighborhood rumors. But one night, I heard noises coming from inside. Metallic clanging, the low hum of machines, and shadows moving across the window when no one was supposed to be home. I thought it was nothing until I found out the HOA had actually sealed part of the records, almost as if they were hiding something. That's when I realized this wasn't just a room, it was a secret, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. What I discovered behind that locked door left me speechless. I live in a suburban neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates. From the outside, it looks picture perfect. Manicured lawns, kids riding bikes, neighbors waving from their driveways. But behind every white picket fence, there are stories, whispers, and secrets. One house, in particular, always caught my eye. It wasn't run down, it wasn't flashy, just ordinary. Too ordinary. But neighbors talked. They said inside that house was a room, a hidden room, that nobody had ever been allowed to see. At first, I laughed it off. I mean, who hides a room in their own house? But the more I heard, the more I noticed little details myself. Deliveries at odd hours, curtains always drawn tight, a window that seemed to belong to nothing. And then came the moment that changed everything. I overheard Margaret, the head of the HOA, warning another resident not to ask questions about the room. That's when I knew there was more to this story than anyone wanted to admit. The problem was simple. How do you investigate something that no one will talk about? The HOA was like a brick wall. Every time someone mentioned the room, the board members got defensive. It's just a basement. It's nothing important. Focus on your own house. But I couldn't let it go. I started digging through HOA meeting notes, vague references to restricted areas and community compliance storage, but nothing concrete. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones. One said they'd heard loud thuds at night. Another claimed they'd seen men in uniforms hauling boxes through the side entrance. A third swore that years ago,
Someone else tried to investigate and suddenly moved away without explanation. The challenge wasn't just uncovering the room, it was breaking through a wall of silence. The more questions I asked, the colder the stares became. I wasn't just facing curiosity anymore, I was facing resistance. And resistance meant there was something worth hiding.
I decided to investigate, step by step. First, I walked past the house at different times of day. In the mornings, nothing unusual, but late at night, that's when things got strange. A faint glow from the cracks in the blinds, the unmistakable hum of machines, like industrial fans or power tools. I took notes, times, sounds, even shadows. I could make out movement that didn't match someone simply living their life. Next, I tried documents. HOA bylaws, property records, building permits. That's when I found something odd. Years ago, a construction permit had been filed for the house, but the project was marked as confidential. A sealed room, reinforced walls, and something listed as environmental containment. Containment? For what? Then came the deliveries. I saw vans with no logos dropping off identical brown crates. The delivery men never lingered. They wheeled the boxes straight inside through a side entrance that no one else ever used. I asked a delivery driver once, half jokingly, "What's in the box?" He froze, then muttered, "Property of HOA." I laughed, but he didn't. He just shut the door and drove off. I wasn't alone in my suspicions. A few neighbors admitted they'd seen odd things too. Flickering lights, loud bangs, even one who claimed to hear voices chanting late at night. Sarah, my wife, thought I was going too far. She said, "It's probably just storage. You're making this bigger than it is." But my gut told me otherwise. The final clue came from a contractor I tracked down who had worked on renovations years back. When I asked him about the house, he shook his head and went pale. "I can't talk about it. Just don't go inside." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was a mystery, one that was hiding right in plain sight.
The breakthrough came on a gray afternoon, the kind of day where the whole neighborhood felt hushed. Clouds pressed low, shadows stretched long, and the hum of cicadas made the silence more noticeable. I was walking past when I noticed something unusual. The side door to Margaret's house wasn't just open, it was propped with a crate. Two delivery workers wheeled in another heavy box, sweat glistening on their foreheads. My pulse quickened. This was my window. I waited until they disappeared inside. Then, careful not to be seen, I slipped closer. Every step felt like thunder in my ears. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over record. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't in a normal house. The air was heavy, metallic, and unnervingly cold, not like a basement draft, but more like walking into a server room. The walls weren't painted plaster, they were steel, lined with insulation and bolts. This wasn't home construction, it was industrial. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the dimly lit room, each tagged with stamped labels, HOA Confidential. My hand trembled as I pulled one drawer open. Inside were folders, each marked with the names of people I knew, neighbors, families. I pulled one out, Miller, Daniel. My stomach dropped. The file wasn't just a few pages. It was thick. Inside were photographs of my house, my car, even me mowing the lawn. Notes about my so-called infractions, copies of fines I'd never even received. I flipped to the next folder. My neighbor's name. Same thing. Photos, complaints, legal drafts. This wasn't an accident. This was a system. And then I saw the crates stacked in the corner. Unlike the cabinets, these weren't labeled with names. They were labeled with dates. Curious, I pried one open. Inside were pre-written violation notices, all signed, all stamped, ready to be delivered in the future. I froze. They weren't just documenting the past, they were planning the future,
punishing residents before they'd even done anything. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing against the steel walls. I turned. Margaret stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing like a predator that had caught its prey. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. For a second, my legs wouldn't move. My brain screamed, "Run," but my body felt frozen in place. Then instinct took over. Past the cabinets, past the crates, it banged against the wall. I didn't stop running until I was back in my house, door locked, chest heaving. That of the floorboard sounded like someone coming for me. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stay silent.
The fallout began at the HOA meeting. The community center was packed. Dozens of neighbors filled the chairs, some standing along the walls. Everyone had heard the whispers, and everyone wanted answers. Margaret sat at the front, gavel in hand, her smug expression daring anyone to challenge her. The agenda was written in bold: authorization of legal action against Daniel Miller. I stood when my name was called, folder of evidence in my hand. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart hammered. "Before you vote," I said, "you all need to see this." One by one, I laid out the evidence. Photos I'd taken inside the hidden room, copies of the files showing residents' names, the pre-written fines stamped with dates that hadn't even happened yet. The room buzzed with whispers, heads turned, faces went pale. Margaret slammed the gavel. "These are fabricated lies. He broke into private property." But I cut her off. "They're not lies. They're your system. You've been tracking us, finding us, planning punishments before anyone even violated a rule." I pulled out my trump card, a written statement from an attorney. It confirmed that parking spots, fines, and secret surveillance all fell outside legal HOA authority. If it continued, the HOA board could be sued personally. For the first time, Margaret's face faltered. And then the spark that lit the fire. From the back of the room, a neighbor stood. "He's telling the truth. I've seen that room too." Gasps rippled. Another neighbor stood, then another. Soon, voices erupted across the room. People who'd been bullied, fined unfairly, or silenced. Margaret banged the gavel again, but no one listened. Her power had cracked. The board members, usually silent under her glare, shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered to each other. Others avoided her eyes entirely. Finally, one spoke. "Maybe it's time we reviewed leadership." That was the moment it all unraveled. In the weeks that followed, Oak Ridge Estates felt transformed. The fines against me were rescinded, the hidden files were collected and destroyed, and neighbors who once avoided eye contact now came to my door to thank me. "You stood up for all of us," one man said, his voice shaking. At the next election, Margaret ran again, but this time she wasn't unopposed. 3 new candidates, backed by the community, stepped forward. When the ballots were counted, Margaret's name sank to the bottom. She was out. The HOA board was reshaped almost overnight. Meetings became open, transparent. Rules were enforced fairly, not as weapons. And for the first time in months, peace returned. I could park in my spot without fear. My wife Sarah smiled again when she watered her flowers. Even the neighbors, once divided, now chatted openly. But the story didn't end there. Someone had recorded the explosive meeting and leaked it online. Within days, the video racked up thousands of views. Strangers from across the country flooded the comments. That HOA Karen got destroyed. This is why I'll never live in an HOA community. Daniel is a legend. My fight had gone viral. What started as a neighborhood dispute had become a story people everywhere could relate to. It wasn't just about a secret room anymore. It was about abuse of power and what happens when ordinary people refuse to back down.
Sometimes I walk past Margaret's old house. The side door is locked now, the steel room emptied. but I'll never forget stepping inside. The chill of the air, the rows of cabinets filled with secrets, the sight of my own name on a file I was never meant to see. It taught me something bigger than HOA politics. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Truth has a way of clawing its way into the light. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking house can hide the darkest stories. One evening, as Sarah and I parked in our driveway, she nudged me with a smile. All this over a secret room. I laughed, shaking my head. Not just a room, our right to know what was hidden inside. That was the real victory.
So what about you? Have you ever discovered something in your neighborhood you weren't supposed to see? A secret room? A hidden document? Maybe even an HOA cover-up? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because the next story might just make you look at your neighbors a little differently. They thought they had me cornered. The HOA claimed my car was a violation. Too old, too visible, not up to community standards. One morning, I walked outside and found the bright orange stickers slapped on my windshield. Tow notice. My stomach dropped. They gave me 48 hours before my car was gone forever. But here's the thing, I wasn't about to let them win. What they didn't know was that I had a plan, and when I executed it, the entire neighborhood watched them fall apart.
For years, I thought I'd found the perfect place to live. A quiet cul-de-sac, kids riding bikes until the streetlights flickered on, and neighbors who waved as they watered their lawns. On the surface, Oak Ridge Estates looked like a picture-perfect community, the kind you'd see in a glossy brochure. And at first, it really was. My wife Sarah and I had saved for years to buy our modest two-story home, the kind with a small front porch and just enough space for a garden that Sarah loved to tend. Our son Max would kick his soccer ball across the driveway, his laughter echoing in the still evening air. For a while, I convinced myself we'd found peace. But in Oak Ridge, peace always came with conditions. The HOA wasn't just a background presence. It was everywhere, written into the rules, whispered about at block parties, stamped into every monthly newsletter. They dictated the shade of beige you could paint your house. They fined people for leaving trash cans visible for more than an hour. They even held annual lawn audits. Yes, you heard that right. Clipboard inspections to ensure everyone's grass was exactly 2 inches tall. At first, I laughed it off. Sure, it was petty, but we could live with it. Most people did. After all, who wants to make enemies with the people who hold the power to find you into submission? But then the notices started. It began small. A warning tucked under my windshield about improper parking because my car's bumper supposedly edged past the invisible line of my driveway. Then came a letter about Sarah's flower pots. Non-compliant arrangement was the exact wording. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Almost. And yet, behind the laughter was something colder. Because it wasn't just about the rules. It was about control. The HOA, and especially its president, Margaret, the woman everyone quietly referred to as the iron fist in a cardigan, thrived on control. She had a reputation for turning neighborly disputes into written violations, for showing up uninvited to inspect backyards, and for filing complaints about things no normal person would ever notice. I tried to brush it off. I told myself not to take it personally, but I could feel it building, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. And then, one morning, I saw it. An orange sticker slapped across my windshield. A tow notice. My car, the same one I parked in my driveway every single day, was now deemed a community hazard. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a car. It was about pushing back against a system that thrived on intimidation. And I knew the fight was about to begin.
At first, I thought the orange tow sticker was a mistake. Maybe someone from the HOA had walked by too quickly, confused my car for a guest's, and slapped it on. Mistakes happen, right? But when I peeled it off the windshield and read the words stamped in bold, "Vehicle in violation, subject to towing within 48 hours, a chill crept through me. It wasn't a mistake. The letter that followed made that clear. The HOA claimed my car violated community parking compliance, a phrase so vague it could mean almost anything. I wasn't parked on the street. I wasn't blocking a hydrant. I wasn't even close to my neighbor's driveway. I was parked on my own property. Still, they insisted I move it or lose it. Sarah thought I was overreacting. "Maybe just park in the garage," she said, trying to calm me down. But it wasn't that simple. My garage was already full, not with junk, but with the normal storage every family has. Bikes, tools, boxes of holiday decorations. The garage wasn't meant to fit both my car and our lives. And besides, why should I have to? This was my driveway, my property, my right. But the HOA didn't see it that way. Within days, more notices arrived. One for the non-compliant shrubbery Sarah had planted. Another from Max leaving his soccer ball in the yard overnight. Each violation carried a warning, and each warning carried the threat of fines. It felt deliberate, like they weren't just enforcing rules, they were testing me. The tension in the house grew heavier. Every time I opened the mailbox, I braced myself for another notice. Every time I saw Margaret walking her morning route with her clipboard, my stomach tightened. She didn't just glance at our house, she inspected it. Her eyes darted over every detail, like a hawk looking for prey. Then came the day I almost lost my car for good. It was a Saturday morning when I stepped outside and froze. A tow truck idled at the end of my driveway. The driver, a man in a neon vest, leaned against the door, clipboard in hand. He wasn't here by chance. He was here for my car. "Excuse me," I said, voice tight. "What do you think you're doing?" He didn't even look embarrassed. He just shrugged. "Got a call from the HOA. Said this vehicle's unauthorized. Papers are signed." My chest pounded. Unauthorized? It was my car, my driveway, my home. I demanded to see the paperwork. Sure enough, stapled to the top was a notice stamped HOA Enforcement Authorization, and at the bottom, in a neat cursive signature, was Margaret's name. For a split second, I thought I'd lost. But then something clicked. I asked the driver a simple question. "Do you see a city seal anywhere on that form?" He frowned, looked again, shook his head. And that's because this isn't a government order. This is a private HOA trying to act like law enforcement. You tow my car, and you'll be in violation of state law. The man hesitated. He looked from the form to me, back to the car, then finally shoved the clipboard under his arm. "Look, buddy, I don't get paid enough for this. Sort it out with your HOA." The tow truck rumbled away, leaving tire marks on the street. I'd won that round, but it was only the beginning. After that showdown, things escalated quickly. The HOA began flooding me with fines, $50 here, $100 there. Improper storage, unsightly appearance, failure to comply. Each one felt less like a rule and more like punishment for daring to fight back. When I refused to pay, they sent letters threatening liens on my house. Imagine that, losing your home not because you broke the law, but because you parked your car in your own driveway. Sarah tried to keep me calm, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Max stopped leaving his soccer ball outside, afraid it would get us fined again. Our home, once a place of comfort, had turned into a battlefield. And Margaret, she thrived on it. At the next HOA meeting, she stood at the podium, smiling smugly, as she announced new parking compliance initiatives. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some nodding in agreement, others looking away, but no one spoke up. Margaret had ruled Oak Ridge Estates for years, and fear kept most people silent. But not me. When the meeting opened to residents, I raised my hand. Why are we being punished for parking in our own driveways? Show me where in the bylaws it says we can't. Margaret's smile never wavered. The bylaws grant the board discretion to enforce community standards, she replied smoothly. If your vehicle is deemed a nuisance, it may be subject to removal. A nuisance. That was the word she used. My car, the one I drove to work every day, the one that kept food on our table, was a nuisance. The room fell silent. And then Margaret leaned forward, voice low and cutting. Compliance is not optional, Mr. Miller. Either follow the rules or face the consequences. It was a threat, plain and simple. But I wasn't about to back down. I started documenting everything. Every notice, every fine, every encounter. I took photos, kept logs, and even recorded the tow attempt. If Margaret wanted a fight, I was going to give her one. Then came the moment that changed everything. One afternoon, as I sifted through another stack of HOA letters, I noticed something odd. The violation notices weren't just sloppy, they were identical. The same wording, the same format, even the same infractions repeated across different households. That's when I realized Margaret wasn't just targeting me, she was targeting everyone. I talked to neighbors, carefully, quietly, because trust was thin in Oak Ridge estates. Some admitted they'd been fined for ridiculous things too. A garden gnome, a kid's bike left out overnight, even wind chimes. But most were too afraid to speak up. Then one night, a neighbor slipped me an envelope. Inside were copies of violation notices, the same ones I had, but dated months in advance. Pre-written, pre-stamped, ready to go before anyone had even done anything wrong. My hand shook as I read them. This wasn't enforcement. This was entrapment. And if Margaret was willing to fake violations, what else was she hiding? The pieces clicked into place. The secrecy, the threats, the identical notices. This wasn't about one car. This was about power, control, and profit. And suddenly, I knew. If I wanted to survive in Oak Ridge Estates, I couldn't just fight back quietly. I had to expose the system. That night, as I stared at the stack of evidence growing on my kitchen table, one thought echoed in my mind. If Margaret had her way, my car would already be gone. My home would be next. And yet deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than just me. Because once you pull back the curtain on power, you never know what you'll find. And I was about to find out. The night before the HOA's big monthly meeting, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the pile of evidence spread out before me. Photos, letters, copies of violation notices that hadn't even been issued yet, but were already stamped and signed. Proof that Margaret and her inner circle weren't just enforcing rules, they were manufacturing them. My hands trembled as I organized everything into neat folders. For weeks, I had been the quiet target, absorbing their fines and threats, pushing back in whispers. But tomorrow, all of Oak Ridge Estates would see the truth. I didn't sleep that night. The meeting room was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls, every seat taken, neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder in the back. Margaret sat at the head of the table, clipboard resting like a weapon in front of her. She wore her usual smirk, the one that said she'd already won. Beside her sat the other board members, stiff-backed, eyes downcast. They rarely spoke. Margaret didn't need them to. The meeting droned on as usual. Landscaping budgets, pool hours, pet waste complaints. I watched as people shifted uncomfortably, half listening, half waiting for their chance to slip out the door. Then Margaret's voice sharpened. Next item on the agenda, vehicle compliance, specifically ongoing violations by Mr. Miller. Every head turned toward me. Margaret's smile widened. Despite repeated warnings, Mr. Miller continues to store his unauthorized vehicle in his driveway. The board has approved a final measure. Unless immediate compliance is achieved, a lien will be placed on his property. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even those who had avoided eye contact with me now looked horrified. A lien, the ultimate weapon. It wasn't just about fines or harassment anymore. This was about my home. I stood slowly, folder in hand. My voice was steady, but inside my chest my heart thundered like a war drum. "You're accusing me of violations," I said, locking eyes with Margaret. "But what about your violations?" A hush fell over the room. Margaret's smirk faltered for the first time. "I don't know what you think you're implying." I cut her off. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I opened the folder and held up the first page. "This is a violation notice I received last month for unsightly appearance. But take a closer look. The date on the bottom doesn't match the day it was issued. It was signed and stamped 2 months earlier. Murmurs spread through the room. Neighbors craned their necks to see. And it's not just mine. I laid out more papers across the table, one after another. Here are copies of violation notices given to multiple households, all of them signed, all of them stamped, before the supposed violations even happened. Gasps, whispers. Someone in the back muttered, "Wait, that looks just like mine." I didn't stop. I couldn't. This isn't enforcement. This is entrapment. Margaret and this board are manufacturing violations, planning fines in advance, punishing families for rules they haven't even broken yet. And I have proof. The room erupted. Some neighbors shouted in outrage, others demanded answers. The board members shifted uneasily in their seats, avoiding Margaret's glare. The walls of control she had built over years were cracking. But Margaret didn't back down. She rose to her feet, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Enough of this nonsense," she barked. "These documents are confidential HOA records. Mr. Miller has no right to them. He has trespassed, stolen property, and now dares to spread lies in this meeting." Her voice shook with fury. She was cornered, and she knew it. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, the ace I had kept hidden until now. "This," I said, holding up a single page, "isn't from me. It's from one of your own." The room fell silent again. This was slipped to me by a neighbor too afraid to speak out publicly. It's a memo, written by Margaret, outlining a schedule of pre-written violations for the next quarter, specific homes, specific dates, and specific fines. I read out loud. Lot 17, unapproved paint color. Lot 23, lawn height. Lot 41, unauthorized vehicle. Each one signed and stamped in advance. I let the words hang in the air. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric. Neighbors exchanged wide-eyed glances. Some pulled out their phones, snapping photos. A woman in the back shouted, "That's my house number." Another cried out, "She fined me for that exact thing." Margaret's face drained of color. And then, in the most desperate move I'd ever seen, she lunged toward me, snatching for the folder. But before she could grab it, 2 neighbors stepped forward, blocking her path. "No," one of them said firmly. "We've had enough." The room erupted. Not in chaos, but in unity. Voices rose, not against me, but against her. Years of bottled-up resentment poured into the open. Complaints about petty fines, harassment, threats, all spilling into the open. "You fined me for a garden gnome," one man shouted. "You threatened to tow my daughter's car while she was visiting," another added. "My kid can't even leave his bike outside," someone else cried. Every voice was fuel to the fire, and Margaret was burning in it. Her composure shattered. She screamed over the crowd, "I am the board president. You will respect my authority." But her voice was drowned out by the wave of outrage. One board member finally stood, his voice trembling. "Margaret, this has gone too far. We can't support this anymore." Another followed, then another. In that moment, the board crumbled around her. Her allies, the very people she had relied on to back her every move, the weight of truth. Margaret stood alone. And I'll never forget the look in her eyes, a mixture of fury, disbelief, and fear. For years she had been untouchable, ruling with intimidation. But now, stripped bare in front of the very people she controlled, she was powerless. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply gathered the papers back into my folder and said the words that had been burning in my chest since the day this nightmare began. "You don't get to scare us anymore." The room erupted in applause. Neighbors stood, clapping, cheering, some even crying. The tide had turned, not because of me alone, but because the truth had finally come into the light. Margaret stormed out of the room, her heels clicking furiously against the tile. But the sound wasn't powerful anymore. It wasn't commanding. It was hollow. The Queen of Oak Ridge Estates had fallen. As the cheers died down, one thought echoed in my mind. The battle was over, but the war for our neighborhood's future had just begun.
The weeks after that HOA meeting felt unreal. For the first time in months, no letters on my door, no warnings, no threats, just silence. And slowly, I realized what that silence meant. Peace. Margaret's fall came quickly. Neighbors who'd once stayed quiet began speaking up, and by the next election, she was gone. The new board promised fairness and transparency, and they delivered. The playground reopened, the pool filled again, and for the first time, the neighborhood felt alive. Even when I'd see Margaret's car creeping by, her power was gone. She was just another bitter face in the crowd. Then came the video, our confrontation online for the world to see. It went viral, turning our small fight into a symbol. People everywhere shared their own HOA nightmares. And standing there, watering the flowers beside Sarah, hearing a neighbor thank me for standing up, I felt something new, pride. We didn't just reclaim our lawns or driveways, we reclaimed our right to live without fear. Because in the end, secrets don't stay buried forever, not even in a perfect-looking neighborhood. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking neighborhood can hide the darkest stories. So maybe the real question isn't whether I won against the HOA. The real question is, what about you? What's hiding in your neighborhood, behind closed doors, locked basements, or the fine print of HOA bylaws? Because one day, you might stumble onto something you were never meant to see. And when that happens, what will you do?
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.
They said moving into this neighborhood would be a dream. Quiet streets, friendly faces, and a fresh start. But the dream shattered the moment the HOA decided my pickup truck was too much of an eyesore. At first, I thought it was just a warning, maybe even a mistake. But then came the fines, the threats, and the humiliating notes left on my door. What started as a simple parking dispute quickly turned into a full